news. It is not clear that our current politics is capable of stopping any of this, of turning it around and giving us an actual Independence Day. So what are we supposed to do? Tonight, we're going to walk you through some of these stories and try to make sense of them in search of that answer, starting with that July 4th horror in Illinois. And with me now is NBC News senior reporter Ben Collins, Jill Wine-Banks, former assistant Watergate special prosecutor and MSNBC legal analyst, and Rosa Brooks, professor at Georgetown University Law School and author of Tangled Up in Blue, Policing the American City. Thank you all for being here. Jill Wine-Banks, I understand you are from not far away from this catastrophe that took place in Illinois. We've released the names of the victims, and here I'll put their names up: Catherine Goldstein, Irina McCarthy, Kevin McCarthy, Jacqueline Sondheim, Stephen Strauss, Nicholas Toledo Zaragoza, and an unknown victim. Your thoughts on just this constant state of terror and fear that has stalked your community now and is simply stalking all of us?
As everybody in the country feels, it really hurts when it hits so close to home. I know people who were shot. I know one person who died. I shouldn't say I actually know her, but friends of mine are friends of hers. She was a member of their temple. And it is very distressing to see this. I know someone who saved a child who was wandering bloody, and it turned out he was taken away from them by his grandparents because his father was killed in the shooting. And it's time to say that no one in America needs an assault weapon. It's something the military needs. It is not something that people need. And whatever mental issues the shooter here had, and it's clear that he did, even if he didn't need that gun. And he got it legally. So it is time to say that the laws that we've passed are not adequate. We need additional laws. And I personally am going to become much more involved in helping to make sure that our laws are changed. Illinois isn't bad, but the rest of the country needs to really stop this. And many of the guns in Illinois come from Indiana, where the laws are very lax.
And, you know, Rosa, that's something you hear often from, you know, when the right sort of tries to go after Chicago. This is a suburb of Chicago. It didn't take place in Chicago. They say, oh, Chicago, which, by the way, is not, you know, the most unsafe city in America. But they use that as a crutch. But there is no city that's not Chicago, right? Whatever you want to think of cities that have a lot of unfortunate gun death, it's everywhere. There is no safe place to go. This is a very affluent, you know, largely Jewish suburb. Of people, the kind of idyllic kind of place that you would think of in America. You're not safe there. You're not safe in Uvalde, Texas. You're not safe literally anywhere, you know, Buffalo, New York, in a store. And so, you know, Tom Nichols wrote a really great piece where he talked about the fact that this is terrorism in the sense that it does the same thing terrorism does. It makes you feel unsafe everywhere. You have to think, is this the day when I go to this park when I'm going to get shot? You have to think about that all the time. And having more police there doesn't do any good. That doesn't change anything. Now, what do you make of this sort of sense that we now essentially live at the mercy of whoever can, you know, go into the store and buy an AR-15 and decide to shoot whoever's available?
Yeah, you know, Joy, I've worked in conflict zones around the world, and I was thinking as you showed the footage from Highland Park, I was thinking, boy, those sounds are like the sounds you hear in war zones. You know, and there are people all over the world who have lived during armed conflicts in daily terror. You know, when does the mortar fall on your house? You know, when does the soldier or the tank come down the street and just kill you? And we are now living in that world too, and we have brought it on ourselves, right? I mean, we can't say, oops, it's the Russians' fault, they shouldn't have invaded us, or, you know, oops, it's Al-Qaeda. This is us. This is 100% us, and it's because we are essentially slaves to a document that was written, you know, more than 230 years ago by a tiny group of white slave-owning men, you know, and we cannot break out of the, you know, the bondage that we have imposed on ourselves from feeling like we have to, everything by our Supreme Court is decided in reference to this ancient document, which is just not serving us well. It is causing enormous problems and enormous tragedies at this point.
And, Ben, I've been reading a couple of you have two great pieces up at NBCnews.com, and I hope people will read them. But, I think the thing is, one of the things the founding fathers did not anticipate is sort of where a good chunk of a certain demographic of Americans are mentally and emotionally right now. I remember back in the 80s when this Faces of Death video circulated around, this thing that was online that people would sort of ghoulishly watch because it just showed people basically dying or being killed, the politician blowing his brains out, stuff like that. But there is like a cultural attraction to that among a certain demographic of young men. If you look at the demographics of these mass shooters, they kind of track. These are young men between 18 and 22. They're largely young white men. There's a lot of them in the, quote, incel community, meaning they can't get, any sexual relationships going. They're sort of loser types that you could sort of stereotype them as. And they have a fixation on violence, on other people's violence, of watching other people commit violence and then repeating and reenacting that kind of violence. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think we're missing that. This guy had like Trump affinities, but it's not like Trumpism. It's not Trump. It's something bigger than that.
Yeah, Joy, the difference is, Faces of Death, after you watch Faces of Death, you didn't immediately go to a place where tens of thousands of other people who had just watched Faces of Death were there to comment on it and say, hey, maybe we could do this thing from Faces of Death, right? That was the difference between the 80s and now. We have the internet now. These people who are otherwise literally disconnected from everyday life, have no real life community, find a community in that space instead, find a community in the mass murder space, have idols. This guy is like Michael Jordan is a Dylan Roof kind of figure, right? The people he was idolizing, the people he was comparing statistics to were mass killers. That's the difference here. And the other thing is he's protected. He's more protected than the guy walking down the street at that parade. Right? The police had visited him a couple of times. They took away his swords, still bought more guns. He was able to do exactly what he wanted to do. He had months to plan it. His last video where he posted a graphic depiction of being shot by the police after shooting up a school, where he rented a set to do that and drop bullets in the school, and someone videotaped him doing that and nobody said anything. That was in January. That kid is the kid that America is protecting right now. We're not protecting the kid who is walking around, the 2-year-old who's walking around looking for his mom and dad who literally were murdered, like Arena and Kevin McCarthy, at that parade. We're protecting the guy who is doing the mass killing with our documents, with our law, until the very moment he does the killing. So we have to rethink this, because nobody, even the young people that I know that want this to change, they are not seeing anything possible to stop it. They know exactly what's happening. They know that kid is more protected than they are. And they don't know how to stop it, because no leader is saying, here are some things we can do. There is nobody in this country right now who has the ability or has the ideas to stop this. But there are plenty of people trying to perpetuate this, make money off of it, run for office off of it. All of those things are still available to continue the grief, to continue the pain in this country. You can still make money on that. But you cannot run for office. You cannot make money. And you cannot do good in this country trying to provide solutions. You just get harassed. That's all it is.
Right. And Rosa, I mean, the thing is that, if people don't understand that you can literally just walk into a sporting goods store and buy a semi-automatic rifle, because rifles are less regulated than pistols. Like if you wanted to commit some mayhem with a pistol, it'd be very hard. You have to do a background check. You don't with this. And so partly it is the laws. There have always been unstable people who have weird fetishes for violence and have dark thoughts. But this is the only country where somebody who thinks like that can literally, within 5 minutes, all they need is their ID saying they're 18 to buy the most deadly weapons, whereas they couldn't even accomplish it if they wanted to do it with a pistol, because they wouldn't be able to get it.
Yeah, no, it's completely crazy. And the irony, of course, is that the theory behind rifles being more readily available than handguns is that they're used for, legitimate things such as hunting. But nobody's hunting deer with an AR-15. If you hunt a deer with an AR-15, you're going to have, hamburger. You're going to have an edible deer. Right? I mean, the harm that people can do with things like AR-15s is just staggering. I mean, you talk to military veterans, talk to police officers, and they will all say, these are weapons of war, essentially. These are not weapons that people are using for any legitimate purpose. They're weapons that people use to commit mass slaughter, period.
And very quickly, before we go, Ben, I just come back to you just one more time. Law enforcement isn't understanding this, right? I mean, everyone is trying to look for a way to sort of backpedal and fix in reverse, whether it's gun laws, et cetera. People aren't understanding these communities. Is anyone watching them? And is there anything you can do with the First Amendment out there? It's very difficult to police this stuff.
Yeah, I think they're just catching up to things like white nationalist militant groups like Patriot Front or Proud Boys, who stupidly group together and admit who they are and wear uniforms and get in the back of U-Hauls together and all that stuff. And that is pretty easy to track. You can infiltrate that. They have marked message boards where they know exactly where they're going if you were the feds, right? This is very different. These are people who think that they are lone wolves. They are not. They all think the same. They all do the same terror acts. So it's very hard to get into these things. There's no single nomenclature for this kind of nihilism. It's a really difficult law enforcement struggle.
It is, and it's domestic terrorism and doing what terrorism does, having everyone feeling constantly terrified. Ben Collins, Jill Wine-Banks, Rosa Brooks, thank you all very much.
Please subscribe to our channel and comment below. Thank you.